leave this time. No, this is no time to let idle curiosity get the better of them. Oops. The traveler had to make it to Castilia. That was imperative. They had to recoup the cost of their travel somehow. That was common sense. Even a novice businessman could tell you that much. Don't spend more than you can afford. So the traveler might die. What of it? Was dying of hypothermia much worse than dying in a ditch from starvation? The traveler glanced at the stained glass windows. Cold, wet rain droplets sluiced down the glass. They shivered. But a little bit of wind and rain had never stopped them before. I'm sorry, Madeline. The traveler could imagine the look on her face when she realized they had fled. It would break her heart. They were complete strangers, but it would wound her all the same. Of that, the traveler was sure. Madeline was too soft, too sweet, too kind. As such, she had not even allowed herself to imagine the traveler might ignore her advice. She had trusted them completely, and now the traveler was going to betray that trust. They were going to betray her, but they had no choice. That was what the story willed. I appreciate all you've tried to do for me, but I am a traveler. I can't linger here. It was already time to move on. Come what may, wind or rain or storm, the traveler would not allow themselves to stop. They hadn't stopped for 2 years. There was no reason to stop now. The end. Oh my! Lakora sighs. The fire in the grate continues to crack, but it offers no light. No reprieve from the inky blackness that swirls about you. It appears that the story has terminated rather too quickly. Is that supposed to happen? It is simply what the story willed at this point in time. It is irksome, but there is little I can do. You don't understand. There's a lot you don't understand. Aren't stories supposed to be constructed of words on paper? The order of the words can't change, no matter how much time passes. Isn't that common sense? But Lakora, as though capable of reading your thoughts, simply smiles. Things may work differently in your world, but this library is not bound by your laws. There is more to these tales than meets the eye. Lakora glances at the innumerable bookshelves that surround her. You glance too. A citadel made of stories. Maybe these are souls. Souls? Microcosms of lived lives. Wouldn't that be interesting? You shiver. It's not cold anymore, thanks to the fire, but you shiver all the same. All these stories, spanning as far as the eye can see, have numerous endings? How many possibilities are contained within their pages? The thought is enough to make you dizzy. Things were so much simpler when stories moved in linear fashion from point A to point B. In any event, it would not do to tarry. We should go back. You blink at her. She can do that. I've been blinking at her. It is simple, just like turning back a page in a book. If only we could do that in real life too. Okay, turn back the pages of the story, return to the beginning of the tale. Turn back the pages of the story, return to the beginning of the tale. Let's see where we start at. Okay, I've examined the tree and I have left. So let's examine the altar for the next path. The traveler rose to their feet, legs heavy with fatigue, and crossed the stone floor. Their feet fell against the stone with a series of harsh striking steps. Thud, thud, thud. In their current state, they were probably too tired to explore. Madeline would have scolded them if she knew. But the traveler could not help themselves. They had always been a curious sort. Why else would they have become a traveler? And seeing new sights invigorated them. This church out in the middle of nowhere was certainly intriguing. Even if the traveler had been more familiar with the main religion of Dequa, caramelism was it called, their curiosity would have been piqued all the same. So this is an altar, is it? The traveler pondered, ears flattened against their skull. The altar consisted of a complex wooden structure set upon an adorned table. There was nothing else. Was this what Madeline had meant when she said there was nothing worth stealing? The church was very plain, and the altar was no exception. Although, the traveler blinked. There seemed to be a prayer book lying inside the wooden structure. That prayer book was probably the most expensive thing in the church, and it was so old it appeared to be falling apart before the traveler's eyes. Okay, let's examine the prayer book. The traveler looked at the battered prayer book curiously, their head tilted to one side. The bindings were made of aged leather, and the traveler feared the slightest brush of a fingertip would make it crumble. It was difficult to see in the relative darkness of the church, but there was an inscription running along the cover. The Book of Marjolaine. At least the traveler thought it said that, but they were not entirely sure. They were not entirely familiar with Dacquasinine. Dacquasinine. They were not entirely familiar with Dacquasinine, and they had trouble making out the finer points of the alphabet, particularly in the dark. Fortunately, the traveler had been interested in language from an early age and was more or less fluent in 3 of the main tongues across the Severe. They certainly knew enough to communicate with Madeline. Perhaps their slight accent made it a touch difficult for Madeline to understand the nuances of their conversations, but it was enough. And speaking of Madeline, it was probably best to sit back down and wait for her. The traveler enjoyed peeking at curios from centuries past, but this book certainly seemed centuries old, but they did not want to ruin anything potentially holy. It wasn't like they'd be able to read the fine, spidery handwriting of a long-dead nun in the dark. Okay, I'm going with, I already did, why is there a tree growing in the church? And can you tell me a bedtime story? So let's go with, what is the nature of your relationship with Daffodil? Wait a minute, are you and Daffodil the only nuns here? Let's go with that one. Are you and Daffodil the only nuns here? This has got to be a short story. Yes, that is correct. There are no other sisters here. The traveler frowned. They had not expected Madeline to answer so bluntly, but it appeared there was nothing else she wished to say on the subject. Perhaps it was personal. That answered one mystery at least, but the guarded look on Madeline's face made the traveler feel somewhat ill at ease. Perhaps they could ask her another question. Oh, okay. So, what is the nature of your relationship with Daffodil? That's the only question I haven't asked. Pardon? Madeline frowned, tilting her head to one side. Her blonde hair shifted, falling over her shoulder. I am afraid I do not understand your question. Oh, The traveler pondered. They were unsure how to phrase this without being insensitive. You two seem awfully close, or are you two lesbians? Okay, I'm gonna go with, because she's supposed to be a nun, I'm gonna go with you two seem awfully, I'm gonna go with, are you two lesbians? That should be lesbian? Lesbian. Oh, Madeline fell silent. Was she thinking? She did not seem offended by the rather direct line of inquiry, to which the traveler was relieved, but The fact that she had not reacted at all led the traveler to believe she did not understand what they were talking about. Is lesbian not a word you use in Dequois? Forgive me for my ignorance, but it's not a term I have heard before. Huh. The traveler was not sure whether this was because there was no way to refer to women who loved other women in Dequoisinine, or whether Madeline was sheltered and never heard of the term before. Either was a valid possibility. In any event, was having this conversation worthwhile? Perhaps it would be better to change the subject. Why is there a tree? Oh, you wish to know about the tree? Well, yes, it's rather unusual having a tree growing in the middle of a church. A pause. Unless this is a common custom in the Dequoisinine places of worship, and I'm unfamiliar with it. Oh no, not at all. That tree is a rather unique feature. Forgive me, I forget how strange it may be to an outsider. I have lived in this church all my life, so it appears quite normal to me. In fact, I believe this church will lose some of its charm if the tree was not there. So this tree has been there for years? Indeed, many, many years, long before I got here. Do you know much about it? Not particularly. I asked Bernadette about it once, and she told me it was special. What? Really? The traveler did not mean to sound so incredulous, but they could not help themselves. It was hard to imagine a scrubby tree like that with a withered trunk and dying leaves of having any potential worth beyond fuel for a fire. Yet there was something curious about it other than the seemingly inexplicable placement. It piqued the traveler's interest, and I don't know how to go back, so sorry. Yes, I do not know how it is special precisely, and neither did Bernadette. But as it is old and has stood in the church for so long, it feels as though it'd be sinful to cut it down. Even if it gets in the way? Even so, well, I am used to it. Daffodil doesn't like it, but I refuse to let her take an axe to it. She has been haranguing me about it for a while. An axe? The traveler was not so sure. The traveler was not sure if they liked that mental image. Madeline seemed to agree because she laughed. I love Daffodil a great deal, but I'm not sure I would entrust her with a sharp, lethal blade. She does seem to have quite the temper. In any event, trees are sacred in caramelism. We cannot cut them down, particularly a tree in a church. Why? It is a story in the book of Marjolaine. It states, Would you like for me to tell you the whole story? Go right ahead. If you truly wish to know. Madeline shifted, her hands folded in her lap as she made herself more comfortable. I already